It was a simple surgery until he started to wake up, eyes twitching, heart racing. Something wasn't right. He could hear everything, the voices, the tools, but his body wouldn't move, trapped inside his own operation. And then one of them whispered, he shouldn't be alive. The blinding white light above him felt colder than death itself. Voices swirled, muffled, distant. Doctors speaking a language he could no longer understand. Then came the sound, that high-pitched scream of the heart monitor, and silence. In that silence, he realized he could hear them. Every word. He shouldn't be alive, someone said. The pain was gone, not numbed or dulled, but erased, as if it had never belonged to him. The chaos that had once filled the room dissolved into slow, weightless silence. He could still see them, the surgeons moving in urgency, their eyes wide with fear, their lips shaping words that no longer reached his ears. Every heartbeat, every sound had vanished, yet he could feel their desperation echoing like distant thunder. He looked down at himself, his body, pale and motionless, beneath the harsh lights, tubes and wires snaking around it like roots clinging to life. And though it should have terrified him, it didn't. A strange calm spread through him, soft as mist, and for the first time, he wasn't inside that body anymore. He was above it, suspended in air, detached yet aware. Below, hands moved in panic. Above, he hovered in stillness. Then a voice broke through, not from any human mouth, but from the air itself, vibrating through every molecule of his being. He shouldn't be alive. The words echoed endlessly, coming from nowhere and everywhere, as if the universe itself had spoken them. He felt lighter than air, weightless, soundless, invisible. Every part of him that once ached or bled was gone. He could see without eyes, move without muscle, and feel without skin. Below him, the doctors fought for a heartbeat that no longer belonged to him. The machines blared, hands pressed, injections flowed. But he only watched, detached from the noise. His breath had left him, yet the world had never looked so alive. Colors glowed with impossible clarity, every glint of metal, every bead of sweat on the surgeon's brow shimmering like starlight. He reached out instinctively, but his hand passed through the bright surgical lamps, through the air, through everything solid he once trusted. For a moment, panic flickered. If he couldn't touch the world, was he still part of it? Then came the pull, gentle at first, then steady, then strong, like an invisible thread tugging at the center of his chest. It called him from beyond the walls, beyond the sterile air, beyond the sky itself. Somewhere unseen, something was waiting, something that wasn't here anymore. It wasn't the hospital anymore. The floor beneath him melted into mist, the hum of machines replaced by a vast, living silence. The air shimmered, not empty, but alive, pulsing with warmth and rhythm. Every breath he took vibrated through space like ripples on a lake. Around him, shapes began to form, faint at first, then clear. Laughter, tears, fragments of his life drifting like smoke through sunlight. He saw his childhood room, his mother's smile, the scent of rain on pavement after school. The light surrounding him wasn't harsh or blinding. It welcomed him, wrapping around his form like an embrace. Yet beneath that serenity, a whisper stirred, soft but certain, a voice not of warning, but truth. Once you cross, there's no turning back. He hesitated, the light reflecting in his eyes like liquid gold, and still. He stepped forward, one slow motion at a time, drawn by something deeper than curiosity, something that felt like destiny. He felt it before he heard it, a pulse, faint but steady, syncing perfectly with his own heart. The gate wasn't metal or stone. It was made of light and memory, living and breathing, as though aware of his presence. It knew him. It had been waiting. Every line, every shimmering pattern carved into its golden surface shifted like veins of energy, whispering secrets from his past. As he drew closer, symbols rearranged themselves, replaying the story of his existence. His first cry, his first laugh, his first betrayal, his first love. Each moment played like a song written in light. He wanted to turn away, to run from what he saw. But the pull was too strong. Something inside the gate resonated with him, like a heartbeat calling out to its twin. He didn't know what waited beyond, only that it was aware of him, expecting him. Every instinct screamed that this was the threshold, the place between everything he'd been and everything that might come next. And as the pulse quickened, so did his resolve. He stepped closer, the glow wrapping around him like gravity itself. The light was alive, and it spoke, not in sound, but in understanding. It didn't enter his ears, it vibrated within his bones, within the memory of what he once was. Around him, his life unfolded like shattered glass suspended in midair, each shard reflecting a secret, a sin, or an act of kindness. Every laugh he shared, every tear he ignored, floated before him like constellations in motion. And within the brilliance stood something, a figure that was neither man nor God, yet radiated both comfort and power. Its presence filled the space like a heartbeat too vast for any chest to hold. When it spoke, the words didn't echo. They resonated. You are not meant to be here. Each syllable was thunder and whisper, all at once, vibrating through his entire being. The touch of light upon his form revealed not pain, but truth, raw and unfiltered. He saw everything he had ever hidden, not from others, but from himself. The fears, the pride, the quiet regrets. And in that revelation, he understood. The light wasn't judging him. It was showing him who he really was. The light no longer comforted him. It stripped him bare. Every mask he'd worn, every lie he'd built to protect himself, dissolved under its gaze. There was nowhere to hide. The truth filled every shadow. He watched his life not as a victim or a hero, but as a witness, seeing clearly how his choices rippled through the people he touched. Faces flashed before him, the ones he'd hurt, the ones who forgave him, the ones who never knew how much he cared. The reflections weren't condemning him, they were revealing him. He saw pain, yes, but also love, courage, small kindnesses he never thought mattered. Every decision was a drop in a vast ocean, each wave touching another. And as the mirrors of light trembled, he realized they weren't punishing him. They were offering him truth. When the glass finally shattered, it wasn't the illusion breaking. It was him, shedding everything false until only his truest self remained. The river called to him, gentle, eternal, endless. It wasn't made of water, but of memory, shimmering like liquid time. Each current carried fragments of his life, faces he loved, laughter that once filled his chest, words he wished he'd said. As he stepped closer, the surface rippled, revealing moments he had long buried, a promise broken, a friend lost, a dream forgotten. The river wasn't cruel, it was honest. Each reflection reminded him how fragile a lifetime truly is, how easily joy and pain intertwine. He wanted to stay, to reach into the stream and hold those memories, to relive the warmth they carried. But the current had its own will. It was stronger than nostalgia, stronger than fear. It pulled him forward, not backward, guiding him towards something beyond remembrance. As the flow carried him onward, he realized it wasn't taking him away from who he was. It was leading him toward who he was meant to become. The sky had turned into a storm of souls, a swirling sea of light and shadow stretching beyond sight. Voices rose and fell like the wind, whispers and cries blending into a single, haunting melody. Every spark that flashed within the storm carried a story, a life once lived, a dream unfinished. Faces appeared for an instant, some familiar, others ancient, brushing against him like echoes. He felt their pain, their hope, their longing to be remembered. It was beautiful and terrifying all at once. The storm pulsed with awareness, alive with emotion too vast to contain. And within its churning heart, something immense stirred, an intelligence older than time itself. It wasn't hostile, but it noticed him. It turned its gaze, vast and unblinking, directly toward his soul. And in that instant, he understood. This was no ordinary storm. This was creation itself, watching him back. He fell, not through space, but through memory. Gravity didn't pull him down. The weight of truth did. Every fragment of his life shattered around him, swirling like broken glass in a hurricane of remembrance. He saw faces he'd forgotten, voices he'd silenced, moments that slipped through his fingers like sand. Every regret, every joy, every heartbeat he'd ignored rushed past him in a flood of light and sound. He wasn't falling through time, he was collapsing into it. The deeper he sank, the clearer everything became. He wasn't escaping the world. He was diving into himself, into the raw, unfiltered truth of existence. And at the very center of that endless descent, there was no fear, no body, no pain. Only awareness. It was the realization that life, death, memory, and meaning were all the same current. And he had finally stopped fighting it. Somewhere between life and the void, he floated. The world was distant, muffled, heavy, like sound traveling through deep water. A heartbeat throbbed somewhere in the dark, faint at first, then stronger, echoing through the emptiness. Warmth followed, slow and uncertain, like a sunrise remembering how to rise. The thin veil between sleep and agony began to tear. He felt his body, the weight of his limbs, the pull of gravity, the ache of existing. Each nerve returned like a star flickering back to life after a long night. He wasn't sure if this was waking or dying, but in that half-light, something became clear. He was still here, not in heaven, not in peace, but in the fragile borderland between the living and the lost, where souls hesitate before choosing a side. Everything snapped. The silence broke under the hammer of his own heartbeat. Cold air burned in his lungs as light sliced through the haze. He couldn't move. He couldn't scream. But he could feel. Every vibration, every cut, every tremor of fear rushing through his veins. The world was sound and movement, flashing and fading around him. He could hear the rhythm of footsteps, the panic in every voice. The figures leaning over him were not part of a dream. They were real. Solid, frantic, alive. And he was trapped beneath them, screaming silently inside his own skin. Each second stretched like an hour. His mind shouted for freedom, but his body refused to answer. He was awake inside a prison made of flesh and memory. They saw it. That tiny flicker behind his eyelids, the faint spark of awareness, the silent scream hiding beneath the mask. The room shattered into chaos. Calm turned to command. Orders flew like sparks from a machine gone mad. He felt hands pressing, metal shifting, voices merging into one long roar. Every sound drilled through his head until it became light, and every light became pain. But worse than the pain were the words he heard. He's conscious. He shouldn't be alive. The phrases cut through the air, sharp and final. He wanted to speak, to tell them he was still here, still fighting. But the words never came. Only the echo of their disbelief stayed behind, circling him like ghosts. The pain was endless. Then suddenly, it wasn't. Light blurred into color. Color dissolved into sound. Sound melted into memory. He was falling backward through his own life. Through laughter, through faces, through the noise of moments long gone. Everything spun in a whirlwind of blood and glass and fading light. He tried to breathe, but the air burned like fire. The noise of the machines faded. The light softened. And somewhere through the quiet, a voice broke through. Distant, fragile, but real. Don't let him go. The words clung to him like a promise, tying him to a world that refused to let him drift away. Time forgot how to move. The noise, the pain, the panic, all of it melted into a long, steady hum. His heartbeat stumbled once, then again, slower each time. Between every breath, there was silence. Between every sound, there was nothing. He felt his mind slipping, falling gently into the space between worlds. It wasn't darkness exactly, more like the color of a fading thought. The edges of reality began to blur, folding in on themselves like soft fabric. He wasn't gone. Not yet. But he wasn't here anymore either. Somewhere far beyond the chaos, something vast waited, patient, motionless, eternal, watching for him to take that final step. Then the sound stopped. No pulse, no motion, no time. For a moment, the universe forgot him. The faces above leaned close, desperate to hold on to what was slipping away. He hovered above it all, still, weightless, untouched by the rules of gravity. Below him, his chest rose with the shock of the machine. Light spilled across the room, but it no longer hurt his eyes. It wrapped around him like warmth, like sunlight through glass. Somewhere in that stillness, he heard his name. It wasn't shouted. It wasn't spoken. It was remembered. Softly, like love whispered across a lifetime. He turned toward it, unsure if it came from the living or from what waited beyond. Then came the storm. Light, sound, motion, everything at once. They were calling his name again, pulling him, dragging him through the static. His body convulsed with every shock, but his soul hesitated, trembling in the space between two worlds. He felt himself being torn apart. Half of him fighting to return, half of him already letting go. Then it happened. A flicker, a pulse. One fragile heartbeat cracked open the void. For that single instant, everything remembered him. The world gasped, light flared, and the silence was broken. The storm faded, leaving behind only the echo of his name, proof that he still existed. Then, silence again, the kind that holds its breath, the kind that trembles before deciding whether to end or begin. For one impossible moment, everything stood still. Then came a rhythm, faint, uncertain, human, a heartbeat. His chest lifted. Air found its way back inside. The world, once cold, once mechanical, turned soft. The light warmed, the noise softened, and time began to breathe again. In the space between 2 seconds, something sacred unfolded. Life returned, not as a thunderclap, but as a whisper. Not as victory, but as permission to continue. The line between here and there began to blur. He could hear their voices, sharp and desperate, echoing through layers of air. And beneath them, softer, another voice, calm, distant, familiar, called his name. The hospital light above him changed, shifting into a memory. It became the sunlight that once spilled through his childhood window, painting the floor gold. Was he alive, or was he dreaming of being alive? His body lay still, heavy and slow, but his soul wandered freely through rooms made of memory. Each breath carried him further from pain and closer to peace. Between every heartbeat, the question lingered. Was he meant to stay, or was he already gone? The world began to dissolve. Metal and light melted into air, and the hospital faded like a dream at dawn. In its place, something new unfolded, a landscape built from memory itself. He saw fragments of his life floating like stars suspended in water. A bicycle resting under the summer sun. A photograph, yellowed at the edges. The echo of laughter that once filled a quiet room. Each step forward carried him deeper into the corridors of his own past. The air shimmered with nostalgia and sorrow, as if time itself was breathing. At the far end stood a door, glowing faintly, whispering with the sound of the sea. It wasn't a promise of death. It was an invitation to understanding. And as he reached for it, everything inside him felt both heavy and free. The door opened, and he stepped into a world that smelled of salt and rain. Air so sharp, it felt like it could cut through thought. Mist rolled across the empty streets. wrapping the lampposts in soft silver halos. The air was colder here, but strangely familiar, like the breath of an old memory finally exhaled. He knew this place, the crooked streets, the soft hiss of waves breaking far away, the silence that carried its own voice. Every window whispered something he'd once forgotten. A laugh, a name, a promise. The town was empty, yet alive with echoes, as if waiting just for him to remember. And somewhere beyond the mist, the sea waited, restless, patient, calling his name like it had never stopped. There, at the edge of the world, he saw him, a boy sitting quietly by the sea, legs folded, tracing shapes in the sand. The tune the child hummed was hauntingly familiar, the same lullaby he once used to calm himself before sleep. Each step closer brought a tide of memory. The crash of waves, the sting of salt, the heavy smell of rain-soaked wood. The moment he learned what fear felt like returned, raw and complete. The boy turned slowly, and in those eyes, wide, unblinking, he saw his own. "You came back," the child whispered, and in that trembling voice he heard both innocence and pain, two halves of himself meeting for the first time. The sea began to stir, the first ripples turning sharp, violent. Foam clawed at the shore, as if trying to pull him under again. The boy's calm gaze deepened, no longer soft, but ancient, knowing. He raised a trembling hand toward the horizon, and the world began to crack open. The sky bending, the ground breathing. Images flickered in flashes, the sound of splintering wood, the rush of water, a scream lost to the waves, a hand reaching, another slipping away, a boy sinking, his own reflection vanishing beneath the light. And then he understood. The one who drowned that day wasn't someone else. It was him. The moment fear learned his face and made a home inside his chest. And for the first time, he let himself grieve for the child he'd left beneath the tide. Then the sea screamed, a deep, endless roar that felt alive. Winds howled like 1,000 voices trying to be heard all at once. The storm tore through the sky, dragging him under, twisting him between the past and now. Every flash of lightning burned through another memory. Every thunderclap beat like a wild heart refusing to die. He saw flashes, faces, hands, moments that blurred between life and dream. Hands reaching for him, refusing to let go even when the world split apart. And through it all, one pulse, steady, defiant, human, guided him upward. The storm wasn't ending. It was becoming him. And as the final wave broke, he realized this chaos was not destruction. It was rebirth. Then, silence. Golden, heavy silence that seemed to stretch forever. The waves were gone, but their rhythm still echoed in his chest. Light poured through the mist like mercy, slow and forgiving. He gasped, pulling air into lungs that remembered drowning. The air was thick with warmth, the kind that smells like life starting over. Voices returned, faint at first, then closer. Hands brushed his face. Someone whispered, "He's back." And it hit him. He'd never been gone at all. He'd just been trapped between the noise and the stillness, waiting for a reason to choose the quiet again. The first thing he noticed was light. Not the harsh glare of hospital lamps, but something gentler. It filled the room like dawn spilling through glass, patient and warm. Machines hummed softly beside him, but now the sound was rhythmic, alive, almost musical. He turned his head and saw the nurse watching him, her eyes wet but smiling. Somewhere, someone exhaled a prayer they didn't know they'd been holding. The air smelled like coffee, like morning rain sneaking through the half-open window. For a moment, he didn't remember falling, drowning or breaking. He only remembered being, breathing, blinking, existing. And somehow, that was enough. Enough to feel brand new. The door slid open, and he hesitated, blinded by the light spilling through. It was too much at once, too real. The world outside pulsed with color and sound, like a painting suddenly alive. The air was crisp, tinged with rain and sunlight. He could taste it, that mix of metal, earth, and new beginnings. Each step forward felt uncertain, fragile, like learning to walk again. Behind him, machines still hummed softly, holding the last echoes of his second life. Ahead, silence, open and endless. Not the silence of endings, but of possibility. For the first time, he wasn't escaping death. He was walking into life. One breath, one heartbeat, one miracle at a time. The city was half awake. Streets still wet, reflections stretching across puddles like broken mirrors. Sunlight scattered off glass towers and passing cars, each glint sharp enough to make him squint. The hum of traffic, the murmur of voices, the smell of fresh bread from a nearby stall, it all wrapped around him like a symphony of normalcy. He walked slowly, his hospital bracelet still loose around his wrist, catching the light. Each step echoed softly, like footsteps in a new chapter. Every reflection in a window showed a man both stranger and familiar. The world hadn't changed, but his way of seeing it had. The camera should move gently, following his breath, as if trying to learn what it means to be alive again. He moved without purpose, letting the city carry him. Every sound became a reminder. Laughter from a nearby table, a child shouting, a dog barking in the distance. The city wasn't noise anymore. It was music. Every smell, every shimmer of light carried proof that he'd survived. He passed the park where she once waited, the bookstore he used to avoid, the cafe that held too many memories. His hands trembled, but not from fear, from realization that every second now mattered, that even the smallest moments, the sip of coffee, the sound of a page turning, were miracles in disguise. He was a stranger here, yes, but for the first time, being lost didn't feel wrong. It felt alive. And then, somehow, his feet led him here. The same cafe she used to visit every morning, waiting, hoping the world would give her a sign. Through the window, he saw her. Still, quiet, her fingers tracing circles on a half-empty cup. When their eyes met, time broke open. No words were needed. Her tears fell before her smile appeared, and in that single heartbeat, everything that had been lost came back. He was gone once, drowned in silence, swallowed by fear. But now, he was home. The sunlight drifted across their table, soft and gold, wrapping around them like a promise kept. Outside, life moved. Laughter, traffic, wind, uncaring but beautiful. Inside, time held still. He didn't need answers anymore. He only needed this moment, this breath, this life, this love. And he swore, quietly, that he would never look away again. He sat there, watching the world through the cafe window. Sunlight trembling through glass, people laughing, life flowing like water around him. For the first time, he didn't feel like a ghost drifting through someone else's story. He felt present, real. Every breath carried weight. Every sound meant something. He looked at his hands, the same hands that once trembled at the edge of life. Now steady, calm, almost grateful. The air tasted sweeter, the light softer, the silence kinder. He realized that survival wasn't the end of his story. It was only the beginning. Because sometimes you have to lose everything, your body, your fear, even your name, to remember what it truly means to live. And as the world moved on outside, he smiled. Not because everything was perfect, but because he finally was.